Section 6. Tallis questions both quantum and classical explanations. The physician and philosopher Raymond Tallis is highly skeptical of efforts to explain consciousness via quantum theory. He starts by asking himself why on earth so many writers think that quantum theory might solve problems that classical understanding of the material world does not. His answer is because certain phenomena such as delocalization, the fact that elementary items do not have an absolute position, and spooky action at a distance, whereby events at one place, such as a wave-particle collapse, instantaneously, non-causally determine events such as a wave-particle collapse at another, seem to be mind-like, at least to the extent of sharing the non-material mystery of mind. In other words, because contemporary physics makes matter almost as weird as mind, looks from the point of view of materialism, it may give us insights into mind. And Tallis continues, yes, matter as seen through the eyes of quantum theory seems less clod-hoppingly zombie-like than the mindless items that make up the push-pull universe of Newton. To some, this means that it is more mind-like, or at least mind-involved. There are ghosts, as Davis and Brown put it, in the atom. For example, subatomic particles such as photons show wave-like properties if they are observed or measured in one way, and particle-like properties if they are observed or measured in another. The thing in itself is neither a wave nor a particle until a measurement is performed on it, at which point it settles into one or the other. In short, the observer lies at the heart of matter. But, says Tallis, the appeal to quantum physics is deeply flawed. According to the Copenhagen interpretation, the ultimate constituents of the material world have definite properties only in the presence of measurement, that is to say, an observer. In other words, quantum phenomena require consciousness and so cannot generate it. Tallis amplifies this by saying that quantum theory cannot explain the observer who makes the measurement that causes the wave particle to settle for being either a wave or a particle. On the contrary, it presupposes the observer. The observer, however, is, of course, exactly what we are trying to explain. If matter at the subatomic level is in itself neither particulate nor wave-like, it is hardly going to generate the appearance or the reality of being either of these things without assistance from conscious beings. The ghost, in other words, is not in the atom, but in the observation of the atom. To imagine otherwise is to succumb to the mother of all transferred epithets, placing mind not merely in the brain or bits of the brain, but in subatomic particles. Quantum mechanics, far from helping us to understand consciousness in material terms, requires consciousness. Without it, without the consciousness of the measuring observer, the elementary constituents of matter do not have a definite nature, a location, a momentum, the condition of being a wave or a particle. In other words, quantum theory needs consciousness more than consciousness needs quantum theory. On the other hand, Tallis holds no truck with those who look to classical as opposed to quantum physics for an explanation of consciousness. He says they are even more obviously on a hiding to nothing. The truth is, no theory of matter will explain why some material entities, i.e. human beings, are conscious and others are not. The phenomena described in physics are present equally in conscious and unconscious beings. Indeed, they are universally distributed through the material world. So they provide no account of the difference between, say, a thought and a pebble, which is the kind of difference that any theory of consciousness worthy of the name must be able to capture. And later in his book, he repeats the same dismissal specifically about quantum mechanics. He says that it applies to all matter, not just matter that is associated with minds, such as conscious human beings. It therefore offers no explanation of the difference between a thoughtless pebble and humans who think, among other things about pebbles. Tallis's ultimate advice for those seeking a materialist account of mind is to develop a richer theory of matter. He dismisses quantum theory, current quantum theories of matter, as weirder rather than richer. He says we need to look beyond the fruitfully impoverished account of matter that reigns in physics and indeed in all the natural sciences, chemistry, biology, neuroscience, and so on, that look to physics as their ground floor, their destination, their ultimate truth. Such an account will not only have to find room for the interaction between insentient lumps of stuff, energies, and forces, shorn of the properties and qualities we ordinarily experience in the world, but it will also have to explain how they come to appear and be experienced, suffered and enjoyed by sentient creatures, and actively made sense of by self-conscious individuals such as ourselves. And it will need to think again about how the material universe and that small part of it that experiences parts of the universe are related. Ironically, Tallis then insists that such an account will not come from physics, although to my mind, the Stapp-Whitehead theory of a psychophysical universe fulfills Tallis's prescription rather neatly. Tallis delivers a final blow against a quantum explanation. The deeper reason to dismiss it is, he says, that it comes from the same place as generated the problem of the observer, ultimately the objective, quantitative view of physical science. The observer has been allowed in slowly through cracks in the theory of light and contradictions in the physical understanding of space and time. but it is allowed entry into the physical world only on physics terms, and in the case of quantum mechanics, is present as only part of a system that generates observations that are measurements. The observer is not a living individual. Finally, Tallis elaborates a little on his project to rethink matter. He says that the most fundamental and pervasive difficulty facing a brain-based theory of consciousness is that it requires a material object, the brain, or parts of it, or events in parts of it, to be about events other than itself, and out of that aboutness to create a world in which the brain's owner is explicitly situated. Tallis is also not happy with notions of supersizing the mind, suggested by Andy Clark and others, because it still leaves the brain at its center, does not get round this difficulty of explaining how a material object can play this role in conferring appearances on other material objects. It is, after all, of the essence of matter understood scientifically to have no appearance in itself, and indeed to have nothing to do with appearances. The physicalist gaze, of which neuroscience is a part, squeezes consciousness appearances out of the world. Physicalism is then faced with the hard problem of how to get consciousness back into the world. As Tallis says, it tries to do this by appealing to certain arrangements of matter that generate awareness. A logical response might therefore be to suggest that we need to rethink the notion of matter. Perhaps a richer, reformed account of this basic concept or stuff than that delivered by physics will give us what is needed. Perhaps one that could incorporate the mysterious counter-causal intentionality that we see in ordinary perception, or even provide the basis for the unity of consciousness, selfhood, and agency. Tallis concludes that ultimately a theory of consciousness will have to make sense of science and more generally knowledge itself, of the fact that the blind laws of physics have given birth to a sighted watchmaker who makes those laws visible and sees how they may be used to shape the world. There is at present nothing in matter as understood through natural sciences, no, not even in the weirdest reaches of quantum mechanics, that would lead one to expect matter to assume forms in which it would become conscious, self-conscious, and knowing. Tallis laments the unholy conceptual mess that quantum mechanical theory is currently in, and comments that if it can't sort out the matter in ordinary material objects, there is little chance that it can sort out mind. On the positive side, however, Tallis makes an appeal to have the concept of matter removed from the jaws of physics. Even more radically, he praises some thinkers who are trying to deliver a new mode of thinking about being, or the fundamental stuff of the universe, which straddles the subjective and objective views. This, it seems to me, is a clear call for a new ontology, one that is compatible with quantum physics and can encompass mental as well as physical phenomena. Hopefully, this is precisely what Stapp, drawing heavily from Whitehead, has produced, and which I would characterize as a form of dual-aspect monism. We'll look at this in the last unit.